And I work in the support and information team alongside my colleague Louise. Before Louise introduces today's speaker, I just want to let you know that we're recording this webinar so we can upload it on our YouTube channel. So if you don't want your image to be seen, please turn off your camera. Also, if you could just keep yourself muted whilst Julie's talking, that would be really useful because it just cuts down on the background noise. There'll be a chance to ask Julie any questions at the end if you have any. If you just put a comment in the chat box and then I'll invite you to ask the question once Julie's finished. And I'll now pass you over to Louise.
Thank you. So today we're joined by Julie Carr from Changing Faces, a national charity offering support to anyone with a visible difference. So from scars, limb differences, skin conditions and birthmarks, Julie and her colleague Sam's work explores how thoughts and feelings are key in improving confidence levels and social skills for those affected by low confidence and self-esteem. So thank you so much, Julie, and I'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Louise. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. And it looks very bright at the moment where I am in Sheffield, so I do apologise for that. But I'm going to be putting on a PowerPoint presentation in a minute as well. But it was just to say thank you very much for inviting me. My background is in children's nursing, actually, and adult nursing for about 30 years. And then I joined Changing Faces a couple of years ago, which are an amazing charity that have been supporting people with a visible difference for over 25 years now. I mainly do wellbeing for children up to the age of 18. My colleague Wendy in London does the adult service, but we represent children 0 to 18 in the north of England. But I'm pleased to say that our charity has just managed to secure funding for another practitioner who will be doing the rest of the country. So I'll be doing the north and my new colleague will be doing the south. So it's really fantastic that we'll be able to have that. So I'm just going to pull up on the screen my PowerPoint presentation and hopefully the technology will be okay. So bear with me for 2 seconds while I do that. And that should be coming onto your screen any second now. Can you all see that? Cool, brilliant. I will start the presentation. Okay. So what do we do? I've said that we support children and young people aged 0 to 18 and their families with any issue arising from having a visible difference. And like we mentioned, that could be a scar, a mark, a condition that affects anywhere on their face or body. Despite the fact that we're called Changing Faces, we do accept referrals for any difference anywhere on anybody's body, and that could be visible or it may be under clothing as well. So to give you some specific examples, my background's in dermatology, so I do get referred quite a few clients who have skin conditions. I also get referred children and young people who may have a cleft lip or palate, birthmarks or vascular anomalies, burns, alopecia, scarring, craniofacial conditions, cancer, or loss of limb, etc. So there's quite a wide variation on the visible differences that we might see or have children referred to us. And our wellbeing service has got several strings attached to its bow. Firstly, we've got a range of really good self-help guides for anybody to access on our website, and that is free to download. And that's on a range of topics from confidence boosting to how to deal with being in the workplace or transitioning from one school to another. My job in particular is running the emotional support and wellbeing service, and I'm the wellbeing practitioner for that. We also, along with my colleague, we run workshops. Now, up until March last year, we were doing this face to face, and we had all manner of creative workshops from circus skills to creative writing, and they were really well attended. But of course, due to the COVID pandemic, we've had to be more creative and switch to online. And last year we did do 6 online events, and that ranged from you know, events with parents in particular, young people aged 13 to 18, and then some smaller children as well. We've got a facilitator in to help us with that one, which I'll show you a little bit about later. Some of the really common worries and anxieties that children mention to us are a lack of confidence. I would say that was number one, definitely lack of confidence. Perhaps anxiety about being in social situations that are new, or friendships. Fear of being judged is a big one, and being bullied and teased, or perhaps stared at, or having the odd remark about your visible difference. And that can sometimes lead to a feeling of real social isolation from peers and friends, particularly during lockdown, we've noticed. Just wanted to share this statistic with you. Now, this is from 2017, and we are reviewing our statistics at the moment. Unfortunately, I don't think these will have changed, and it's quite sad to note that 49.5% of primary school children and 50.6% of secondary school pupils experience bullying that targets their appearance in particular. And what I would do would be to allow children and young people to have that space and time to just work through any concerns. And I would help them identify strategies that will help boost their confidence, increase resilience and self-esteem. And like I mentioned, that's at the moment done on Zoom. I mean, the aim really is to make people feel more confident, less socially isolated, perhaps less anxious about going into new situations, more resilient, having a more positive body image, and basically just living your best life. And I don't know if you can see this very well, but as an example of some of the one-to-one emotional support tools that we use, we do a lot of challenging negative thoughts and self-beliefs. A lot of children come to me and they're quite doubtful about themselves. They have this inner narrative which is quite negative, and we help to reframe the negative thoughts with positive ones, which again boosts self-confidence. And we explore social tools and techniques. We also look at what a good friendship means and how that's reciprocal, and how we can promote meaningful friendships and lasting ones. We also do a lot of helping children and young people to get more involved and empowered with their healthcare and their decision making. I think particularly during lockdown, it's come to my attention that many children have felt a little bit isolated from their healthcare professional teams, or perhaps they've even had hospital appointments cancelled, they've had surgery cancelled or rescheduled, or maybe they have got rehab that they've slipped behind with. I know certainly a few people that I've talked to have felt that they haven't progressed last year and this year. Other emotional support tools we have are just kind of offering that calm, non-judgmental space to talk through problems. And I also do quite a lot of signposting and collaborative work with other charities where needed. I just wanted to share with you a couple of techniques that we use. This is a kind of a whistle-stop tour of what we do. But one of the things that many of our children worry about is how to handle staring. So I've put down a few points. So what could you do if somebody was staring at you and you felt really uncomfortable? Well, firstly, you could ignore it. I know that is much easier said than done, but it is definitely their problem, not yours. You could raise an eyebrow, or you could frown to show them that you've seen them, you've noticed, and that you're not impressed. You could smile, because smile does such a lot. They might actually stop staring or become embarrassed and realise that they've been staring, but they might actually smile back. If you're nearby and they're consistently staring, you could ask them politely to stop and say that you feel uncomfortable, but always remember to keep really calm and in control to prevent that situation escalating. And of course, you always have that possibility that you could walk away and just try not to dwell on it. They may not actually have been looking at you, they could have been looking at something different. And it was a split second in time, and they'll have forgotten about it in a couple of minutes, and you should do the same. We also have quite a useful technique called the ERD technique. Now, it doesn't sound very catchy, I know, but bear with. It stands for explain, reassure, and either distract or divert. So if you take the first one, explain, that means that you're very briefly, without giving too much away, explaining your visible difference. And do check the language that you use, make it very positive rather than negative, and use non-medical terms if you can, and keep it short and to the point. Reassure is the part of the technique where you would reassure the other person that it's not a problem for you, it doesn't stop you doing the things that you love in life, for example, but you're also trying to take control of the situation and just saying, doesn't bother me, let's move on from this. And distract or divert is the last part of the technique, which really takes the spotlight away from you, excuse me, and asks them a question or pays them a compliment, because people like essentially talking about themselves. So if you can detract from yourself and put the spotlight on them, that's a good way of being in control of the conversation. And a few tips with that would be to look at the environment you're in, whether or not you are in the middle of a park, you're at school, you're at college, you're in the workplace, and take your cues from the situation around you. And it's really useful to practice this technique. And what I would say to the young people I support is that do a bit of role playing with a trusted friend or a relative, and have some good stock answers so that you're able to do it quite clearly and that you can do it confidently if the situation arises. So that's the ERD technique. We also look a lot at self-care and things like the importance of sleep, particularly during the pandemic. It's been really important to carve out time in your daily routine to take care of you, essentially. And my top tips would be, don't let your visible difference be the sum total of who you are, because you're made up of so much more than that. Keep doing the things in life that you love. Don't put them on hold. Put time in your diary or your routine to have a bit of calm time or relaxation time. And a really important one is to make sure that you detox from social media now and again, and perhaps think about only following people who are inspiring or positive, because social media can have real positives or negatives. I mean, I think a lot of it is down to who you're following. So it's kind of find your tribe, really, isn't it? Make sure that you get enough sleep at night, and to switch all your gadgets off a good hour before you go to bed, which is quite sensible. One of the techniques we use with young people is bullet journaling. I love this technique, and it really is quite useful. Or a gratitude journal, writing down 3 things a day that you are perhaps grateful for, and do that for a month, and it can really, really change your attitude. So it could be little things, because there's not much going on during the pandemic, I do realise, but it could be things as like the sun was shining today and I felt really good. I went for a walk with a dog, or I enjoyed a nice meal with family. So it doesn't have to be big things, but writing down 3 things a day that you're really grateful for, or just having a positive, reflective diary. Keeping up with your hobbies and embracing them, and relaxing. Breathing techniques. Now, I just wanted to share a really good breathing technique with you, and you might say, well, we all breathe, what's so different about that? But actually, if you're in a situation where you're very anxious, or perhaps you're panicking, this could be anywhere, if you just adapt your breathing, you can start to reduce your anxiety. And one of the techniques I'm going to share with you is really simple. You can do it anywhere. And it's called the 7-11 breathing technique. So you breathe in through your nose for 7 seconds, and then you breathe out through your mouth for 11 if you can. If you have got problems, if you're asthmatic like me, you might only get to 9. But it's important that the out breath is actually longer than the in-breath, because that sends a signal to your brain that everything's okay. And if you think about when you get a fright, you go and you hold your breath, don't you? And then when you find out everything's okay and it was just your mate behind the door that made a noise, you would go, oh, like that. And it's that out breath that sends that signal to your brain. So in for 7, out for 11, and just keep that process going until you feel a little bit more calm as well, and just keep bringing your focus of attention back to your breathing. Now, that takes a bit of practice, and you probably want to be doing it when you're feeling calm rather than just trying it out when you are anxious. So you need to build up with that a little bit, but it's a really useful technique that we use. So moving on from the techniques, because I know that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour, we also deliver workshops. As I mentioned, it's online at the moment, and we did 6 workshops last year for younger children, teenagers and parents to boost confidence and, you know, share stories and connectivity and really sort of talk to each other. And I think it worked brilliantly last year, and everybody's now got the technology and the capability to do this. My favourite one was in November. We did an Animate and Celebrate, where we got a facilitator in to actually do some cartoon work, and in real time she managed to put that together and make it into an animation. And I have got a short clip for you. This was our 8 to 12-year-old workshop, and it was a lady called Lydia Hibbard, and I will just see if this clip will play, because it is, bear with me, it is very, here we go. So this is a work that the children did.
Sorry, can I just interrupt you there, Julie? We couldn't actually see the clip.
No, I couldn't see. I didn't know if it was just my side. No.
Can you not see it?
No, I think you have to come out of sharing, do you, and then share the clip playing, I think.
I'm not sure.
If I did a new share, would that
Perhaps reshare, yeah.
Do you think that might work?
Perhaps. I'm not.
Let's have a little go. Just shout if it doesn't. I'm putting it on now. Just
okay.
Sorry.
It's all right. We can always share it afterwards.
Yeah. I'll just press it. Is that doing it?
No, I can't see that.
Oh, what a shame.
It's okay. We can share it afterwards with people.
So as I mentioned, we've got the workshops that are online at the moment, and if anybody is interested at all in coming to those workshops, we have got an email address because we're not in the office, and that is ynh@changingfaces.org.uk, and you can refer yourself if you are over 16, or your family can refer you if you're under 16, or a professional can do that also. And we are on Twitter at Face Equality. We have an Instagram account and also a Facebook, Changing Faces for Yorkshire and Humber. And changingfaces.org.uk is where you'll find a lot of information on self-help guides, which are really useful. So thank you very much for listening. I'm sorry that that didn't play.
That's
I'll just come back to you. Okay. It's a shame it didn't play, because it's really sweet.
So, honestly, we can share it.
Just put it on. Actually, I think it's only just a clip, so I'm sure Comms will be happy to share it on Facebook and stuff. It's all right.
Can I just ask, Julie, do you have workshops for the adults as well, or is it just for children?
No, they don't at the moment, because the team down south just don't have the funding for that. It's a charity. It's always difficult, isn't it? Because you're kind of restricted by what you've got funding. Children in Need really wanted us to do workshops, so we were very lucky.
Okay.
I do parent workshops, if that helps.
Yeah, And the new colleague Wendy that you mentioned in the south, is she going to try and expand, do you think, things?
So Wendy's one of our oldest wellbeing practitioners, but we've got a new lady called Lisa Crosby, who was interviewed last week, and she's going to be doing the South and Wales. So we should be covered, and I think I might get Scotland as well. So as you can tell by my accent, that's where I'm from. So that would be great if I could cover Scotland too. But we'll see. But yes, it should be a national service. Yeah.
That's good. And just to ask, if we had an adult who has had primary bone cancer and is left with some visible difference, whether it's the gait or one leg shorter than the other or whatever, how would they get hold of your service or your charity? Is it through that email address that you gave?
That's my email address for the north, but they would go through the website. There's a lot of information on the website as to how they can get in contact with the information team, and then they would talk to them and then allocate them with the right services, because it could be cosmetic camouflage. I forgot to mention that we also run cosmetic camouflage. So if people had scars that they wanted to camouflage, our team would be able to do that. I mean, clearly at the moment there's not as much face-to-face with the skin cam team, but they're working on a lot of stuff behind the scenes to adapt that.
I mean, it's a wonderful service that you offer. You know, it's heartbreaking to think though that children that have been through some really, and adults as well, that have been through some really difficult treatment, then still have to have challenges to face when they've finished all that treatment, you know, and they have to be helped to overcome those challenges.
Absolutely.
I know.
Yeah.
The statistics around school and bullying, that you can imagine it, but it's hard to see it written down that that's the reality. It's tough. Oh, Tracy, fabulous. Just looking at the website, it looks great. Sorry, I was late to attend.
We've actually got a new website that's being launched. We've had a lot of work done on our digital platform during lockdown. So we've got a new all singing, all dancing website that's going to be introduced, I think, in a couple of months' time. So it'll be easier to navigate it. So it's brilliant. It's really good. Quite excited about that.
Yeah. I was going to ask a question, Julie. So it was just around whether confidence you think can be taught to somebody, or whether you think it's something that someone naturally has, and if they don't possess it, I don't know, where do you think confidence can come from?
Do you know, I'm a big fan of the fake it until you make it. And I think that using a few of the social techniques that I mentioned earlier are quite useful for making you feel more confident. And role playing them as well. But I definitely think that you can get better with confidence. I don't think it's just that you're born into it.
I agree.
Yeah, I definitely think you can do a lot of work with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good to hear. That's encouraging, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Go on, Dave.
Yeah, I was just going to say with confidence, it might be achieving certain goals to prove yourself, and that I'm sure that encourages confidence in people.
I agree. Yeah, something that you thought you couldn't do possibly, and building up to that, and you know, even if it's just walking into a busy bar or a busy cafe or something and knowing people are going to turn around and look at you, or you know, something like that, it's quite a big deal, I'm sure, for a lot of people.
I think you're right, Louise. It's about layering up all those positive experiences, isn't it?
Yeah,
and also the other thing is, like, you know, I was talking about the jigsaw, and I showed you the jigsaw that the children did. It's about thinking about, reflecting about all the things that you are good at as well, not focusing on that one particular issue, which is your visible differences. It's bringing the spotlight onto all the things that you're good at. And sometimes that can be a real confidence boost, because people, when they come to us, they forget they're actually really good at singing. They're fluent in 2 different languages. I had a little boy the other day that was telling me he could play the piano. He was fluent in 2 languages. He could draw, he could play football, despite the fact that he had a prosthetic leg, and that he could swim. And then I was kind of like, wow. That's amazing. And by the end of the session, he felt, you know, a lot more confident, because he'd remembered that he was good at so many things that he'd just forgotten about, really.
Yeah, it's like switching the focus, isn't it? So it's focusing on what you're good at,
exactly.
what you haven't got, or what you're missing, or what's different about you.
Yeah.
We've actually got a question from Tracy. Would you like to ask the question, Tracy, or do you want me to ask it? I'll ask the question. Tracy would like to know, do you think children deal better with hair loss from chemo, or the adults deal with it better, or vice versa, or does it depend on the individual?
Yeah, I think it doesn't depend on the individual, but I think children are, on the whole, in my sort of experience from being a children's nurse as well, that they're a little bit more resilient. Yeah, and I think they're more able to sort of interact with their peers at school, and it actually depends a lot on the school as well. Most schools nowadays are very supportive, thankfully. So I have seen a lot of schools that have really intervened and being so supportive for families.
What do you think the best approach is for schools in that situation? Is it to ask the pupil to talk about it to their peers, or what's the sort of recommended?
That's really interesting, and that's a conversation I've had a lot. It's quite a dilemma, isn't it? I would say, actually, we have got a schools pack that's coming out in May, and that is going to be launched for all schools. It's like a resource pack that they can use to talk about visible difference and unconscious bias.
That's really good.
So that they're not actually putting the spotlight on one particular child that, say, has a visible difference, but they're looking at the differences in all of us and bringing out all our differences and celebrating them. So I would say celebrate everybody's difference, and if they're doing it in school as part of the curriculum. So a lot of schools, primary schools, use the film Wonder. I don't know if anybody's seen that. It's this amazing film with Julia Roberts, and it's a really good way of introducing that into the curriculum, because of course there's a book as well, and that starts to sort of stimulate discussion about differences and how we're all different and unique. Yeah, so I would say not to shine a spotlight on, unless that child is really up for it. I have got some children who've been tremendously experienced in just going in. I had one little boy that I knew for years who had eczema, who actually just talked about his skin condition to the class. He was happy to do that because he was quite confident, but other children might shy away from that and feel that there would be more issues as a result. So it depends on that child. Yeah.
Do you work with the schools, Julie, or do you just work with the child and then the parents?
No, I do quite a lot of advocacy work with parental consent and child consent, and sometimes I do speak to schools and highlight that there's an issue, because schools are so busy that sometimes that gets forgotten about. So I do speak to schools. We don't have a schools worker at the moment. We are hoping to get that, and that would be part of the the programme that's going forward in May with the school resources. But yes, I certainly do speak to teachers and SENCOs as well, teaching assistants, if there's any particular problems, or if some of the stuff that I've been doing with the child one-to-one could be adapted in the classroom. So we do quite a lot of work around shifting the focus of attention if children are getting anxious. So they, for example, they might be allowed to bring in some fidget toys and tactile things, and so I'd work with the SENCO or the teacher to facilitate that. That's just one little example.
Fantastic.
Tracy's just said that definitely young people deal with differences better. Yeah. I would agree with that wholeheartedly.
There's a weather girl here on the telly with one arm amputated. I commented on it, and my daughter, who was about 20 at the time, shot me down and asked me why I had to point it out. I was so proud of her. Oh, that's so nice.
Yeah.
I think we have one on the Yorkshire local news. I think she might have also had an amputation of her arm. And yeah, I used to feel like sometimes if you pointed it out, people were like, well, I don't know. I think it's getting better when you talk about those things now. But
expected.
Yeah.
When my children were younger, there was a CBeebies presenter, and she did have I was just
about to mention her. Yeah, she was lovely.
Yeah, that was fantastic. It was such a positive role model for very young children. So I thought it was fantastic.
Absolutely.
I've just got a question for you, Julie, if I may. So we're all living through these various lockdowns, very strange times. Social isolation's increased. That's going to have an effect on people's confidence. Do you agree? with the
Yeah, massively. But interestingly, I think during when we sort of locked down number 1, we're in 3 now, but when it was lockdown number 1, I did notice that people were quite comfortable with that. A lot of my clients were having a huge sigh of relief. They didn't have to go outside. They didn't have to worry about that visible difference. So there was a kind of like a honeymoon period for about 3 months until we started then going back into normal, well, some sense of normality in the summer. And people started becoming really worried about integrating back into society. So there was that initial period when people were like, phew, it doesn't really matter, I'm not bothered, I'm not going out. And then it was again, oh, I've got to go through all this again. And it did make it harder, definitely. I had a lot of clients who had been doing so well before lockdown, and then once they were going back to school in September, things just kind of unraveled. In fact, what we did last August was we put in place a series of 4 workshops for teenagers, because we noticed that they were particularly worried about going back to school or going to sixth form college, and we looked at ways to try and boost their confidence around that. So that was quite noticeable. It has ebbed and flowed quite a bit.
We're not supposed to be locked up like this, are we?
No, we're social creatures. It's
Yes, yeah. And I imagine with a lot of your clients, you've built up their confidence, you've worked together, they've got the skills, and then suddenly they're not having to put them into practice, and they just sort of go backwards, really, take backward steps.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened in the summer. Yeah.
Oh, it's sad. I hope it'll be over and done with as soon as possible. The last thing that we wanted to raise was, you sort of touched upon it, but I suppose if an individual is building up to doing a certain thing, or going back to work, having had surgery that's altered their appearance, you mentioned the breathing techniques, and was it ERD, which I think is really good, really good. Yeah. Is there anything else that we could encourage people to do to try and alleviate anxieties around these situations?
Yeah, I guess if it's integrating back into the workplace, you could make sure that you have some champions with you as well, and make sure that you've had that discussion with your line manager beforehand to make it a little bit easier, and perhaps maybe just stage it back in gently, rather than, if you can, that is, going back to work full time. But at each step of the way, talking honestly to your line manager about how that feels. One thing I didn't mention is a lot of our adult clients have had real issues with Zoom or other platforms like Teams, because you're actually being viewed as just your face. So the adults who have got facial differences, visible differences, have found that quite difficult in terms of being on screen. Yeah. So that's been quite difficult at meetings and presentations, because the focus of attention is very definitely on their face. So I've had a lot of feedback, but children, interestingly, haven't been quite as worried about that when they attend meetings or Google Classroom. They've been less concerned, and I don't know if that's just because they accept technology more than adults do, but I just thought I'd mention that.
That's interesting. I hadn't even thought about that. The focus and having to look at your own face as well if you have got your screen on. It's not for
quite disconcerting for some people.
Sometimes I actually cover my face with like a box because it puts you off. Like, you think, I don't really want to look at myself speaking, I would like to look at everyone else. And
exactly,
I can see that quite triggering.
Yeah, you can imagine how that might feel if you had things like a birthmark or a cleft palate. You would feel quite vulnerable.
Yes.
And also in person, you're using your body language as well to communicate. Whereas if it's just on Zoom, it's just your face, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just your face. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
Were there any more comments or questions that you wanted to raise?
No, that's really interesting.
It was.
Yeah.
Just
really
going
good.
back to the workplace, there's quite a lot of self-help guides on our website.
Okay.
That you might want to look at as well. If I've
Brilliant.
forgotten, they're all on there.
Okay. Brilliant. Okay.
Anything else?
Oh.
the reason Tracy's not actually showing her image and talking is because she's on a laptop or a desktop, sorry, and I don't think it's working like it does on her iPad. But she's saying that she's been bald on Zoom, wore wigs, or sporting my very unfashionable new hair, and it is hard on Zoom. So she's, you know, agreeing with what you're saying.
Yeah.
Thanks for that, Tracy, because it's sometimes hard to say things like that aloud, isn't it? But it's an unfamiliar thing that we've just had to get used to, and there was no lead-in time to it. It was almost overnight that people had to accept the fact that they would be there on different platforms, and that has been really quite hard and taken its toll.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, right. Thank you so much for that. It was honestly, it makes you think about things in a slightly different way, and I think it can be applied to people who, you know, maybe aren't always open about having a limb difference or a scar. It can actually just be a confidence thing, and it's good to think about things in different ways. So thank you, Julie, and we will share the clip that you wanted to try and share, definitely. And we'll pop this up on YouTube and let people know who weren't able to come today about it. Any further things to say, Jo?
No, just to say thank you again, Julie. That was fantastic, and hopefully we can work with you.
Yes,
It'd
definitely.
be amazing.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you very much.
Bye. Bye.